So welcome everyone. So let's start with quiz number 6, which was more of the IAM AssumeRole policy. So this is a question that I have asked over LinkedIn and YouTube. So let's start with the question. So the question was, an IAM user has STS AssumeRole permission, but still gets access denied when assuming a role. What's missing, right? So in the layman terms, if I tell you about that, is let's say we have this IAM user here, right? So this is the IAM user that we have. Now this IAM user has STS AssumeRole permission, right? Now what happens is this user wants to assume a role, right? It wants to assume this role, right? But still it's not able to assume a role and it's getting access denied error when assuming a role. So what could be the probable reason behind it? So there were 4 options that I've asked. So the first option says that it should be the role trust policy. There is some issue with the role trust policy. Second says it should be the role permission policy. Third option says that user MFA enabled, because the user has MFA enabled and that's why it's not able to do that. And fourth one says that it's the session duration limit. So what do you think? What should be the right answer? So till the time you're guessing it, let's start with the practical demonstration. So let's say this is a user, Deepak. Okay, so this is a user. As you see here, there should be an IAM user, right? Let's say this username is Deepak. Okay, now it wants to assume a role. Okay, so this is the assume role. Okay, I've just created it for you. So I will not show you the process of how it was created. I'll just show you what is it doing. Okay, so let's go again to Deepak user, and Deepak has read-only access. Okay, that's a generic access. And the second thing, it says that it has STS AssumeRole policy, right? You saw here, right, that it says that it has STS AssumeRole, right? So this is what I have already created here, STS AssumeRole policy. And the second, and the role that it wants to assume is test AssumeRole. And if you see here, it has Amazon S3 full access. Okay, so having said that, if this user, Deepak user, wants to assume a role, if it assumes a role, then it will get Amazon S3 full access, and then he or she can do whatever things he wants to do in the S3 console, maybe creating a bucket, uploading an object, or XYZ, any operations on the S3. Now the thing is, the option says that it has permission, but still it has STS AssumeRole permission, but still it's getting this error. Okay, so what could be the probable reason? Let's see. So now what I'm trying to do is, I have logged in, I have created my incognito, just opening my incognito browser, and if you just check, this is the user, I have logged in, right? And now let's try to do switch role. Okay, what happens as of now? Okay, so we'll try to switch role to a test role, to the IAM role. Okay, so this user will do a switch role operation. Now where is this role? This role is in the same AWS account. So same AWS account, and the role name is test assume role. I want to assume this role, right? Now this Deepak user wants to assume this role, and there's something which is just the color. Let's see what happens. See, it says that check your information or contact your administrator. So something is wrong, right? Now what happens? So this is the concept that I want to tell you about today. So what happens is, whenever you are trying to assume a role, whenever you're trying to assume a role, only having STS AssumeRole on the IAM user will not help, because if that would have happened, so this user, this IAM user, which was Deepak, would have assumed all the IAM's role present in that account, right? But this is something which is a security glitch, right? So this is where the zero trust and all thing happened, right? So that's the reason. This user, if it has AssumeRole policy, doesn't mean that it will be able to assume the IAM role. So what is the concept here? So there's something known as trust relationship, right? So what happens is, this IAM role should explicitly trust this IAM user, and once it trusts this IAM user, then only this IAM user will be able to assume a role. Okay, so let's say So this when we are saying trust, what happened, what actually I meant to say was, this IAM rule should say that, hey, I trust this user Deepak. And if it says that I trust this user, then the IAM user, if the IAM user will have this permission, he or she will be able to assume the role, else not, right? So that's the thing, because I can give the permission to any of the user, right? But if the role says I don't recognize this user at all, or if I don't trust this user at all, then the user, even if it has the STS assume role, will not be able to assume the role. Now, where is this trust relationship coming from? How can I define the trust relationship, right? That should be the question. Okay, now let's go to the section here. So if you look at here, there's something known as permission is fine. What the role will be able to do? It will be able to do all the S3 related operations. And here comes the trust relationship. So if you see here, the trust relationship, this is something which is of this format, right? Now it says that it is allowing STS assume role. So STS assume role is needed whenever someone wants to assume a role, right? This is the API call that gets hit in the backend. Okay, so the trust relationship says that STS assume role is allowed, but only for the test user, right? If you go back here, how many users do I have? I have 2 users, test and Deepak. And now this role says that, hey, I trust only user with the name test, and I don't trust this user Deepak. And that's the reason when I was trying to assume a role, I got an error. You saw that, right? When I tried to do a switch role. Now what I have to do, I have to edit this trust policy, and now I have to write down the, either I can remove it, or either I can write down the one more. I will just add one more ARN of this user. Let's do one thing. Let's remove this test, because I don't want this test user to assume this role. I want user Deepak. Okay, so let's update the policy. Okay, now what it's now at the layman term, what you can see is, this is the test assume role. It has this permission, and trust relationship says that user Deepak will be able to assume this. Now what happens is, now this IAM role is saying that, now this IAM role says that I trust Deepak, right? Now once it trusts Deepak, now if Deepak has assume role permission, then he will be able to assume the role, right? Now let's see whether this statement is valid or not. Okay, okay, let me switch role. Let me type the account ID. The account ID is the same account. IAM role name. The role name is test assume role. So Deepak, user Deepak wants to assume this role, and this is just, I mean, you can just leave it blank or something like that. It will show you this color. That's why. Let's see what happens. So there's no error, and now I am able to log in. How would you confirm that? See here, test assume role, right? Now you saw that user Deepak was able to assume this role. Let's go to S3. Okay, let's try to create a bucket. Whether it will create or not, let's see. Okay, let's go to Mumbai region. Let's create a bucket. Let's name it Deepak testing 22 new, something like that. It should be something unique. Okay, I'm able to create a bucket. Now let me delete it. So I think you got my point, right? So that's the main topic that I want to touch today. And I thought that it's very important to for you to know that how trust relationship works and how a user assumes a role. Same thing happens with the role to role communication, how a role assume a different role altogether. So I think you got my point, right? So the answer would be definitely, this is the answer. Role trust policy. This is the answer, right? Now let's go to the second option, role permission policy, right? So it has nothing to do with the permission policy, because when does this permission policy hit? The permission policy will hit only when this IAM role will be assumed First, this user will assume this role. Now, once assuming, what all actions this user will be able to do, that depends on the permission policy. As you saw here, the permission policy was S3 access, right? And then only I was able to create a bucket and delete the bucket. So definitely this is not something which was the issue. The issue was with the first option, user MFA enabled. Again, nothing to do with MFA, okay? Because even if you disable MFA, even if you enable MFA, this will not have any issues on the trust policy, okay? And session duration limit, this is something which says that, which means that once a user assume this IAM role, okay, then for how long this role will be valid, right? I mean if the user doesn't do anything post after certain duration of time, it will automatically log out, okay, or sign out. I think it's 24 hours. I'm not sure, I need to check the document, but yeah, as far as I remember, it should be 24 hours, but you can also minimize or maximize it. So nothing to do with session duration, because session duration comes into action only when the IAM role is assumed successfully. But the question here states that the user is getting access denied when trying to assume a role. So the issue was on the trust policy, right? So this is the issue. So you have to check the trust policy and also the permission policy. So what have we learned here? So whenever a role or a user wants to assume a role, so first what happens is user should have STS AssumeRole permission, right? And second thing, the trust policy of the IAM role should allow the user, right? Should allow the user to perform STS AssumeRole API. Okay, so you saw that, right? The user first, what happens is the user should have this permission. This is the first criteria, okay, AssumeRole. And the second thing is the role which the user is trying to assume, the role trust policy should explicitly allow that user to call this API, and only after that the user will be able to assume a role. So I hope that makes sense today, and I think that you got a much more understanding of how this IAM AssumeRole works in the backend. And with this, let's end the session, and I hope this was a wonderful session for you, and you got much more idea of how the STS AssumeRole works in the backend, and what is the prerequisite for a user or for a role to assume another role, what should be there, right? So with that, let's end the session, and stay tuned and just wait for the next quiz question. So till the time, take care, bye bye.